And we're here with director and filmmaker Zeinabu Irene Davis. And we're first off just so grateful to have you. Thank you so much for giving us your time. We know how busy you are, but the Film Center has just really made this effort to highlight Black films this month for Black History Month. And we are so excited that your film was one that was highlighted. So we just want to thank you so much for being here. Um, we have a little bit of information on you. Zeinabu is from Philadelphia, has an MA in African Studies from UCLA, and also earned your MFA. But I would love from UCLA, as you know, because of the film, but we'd also love to hear from you. What brought you to LA, and what was it like for you to be in LA during that time?
Well, I was in LA around from the pretty much most of the 80s, Frankie. And what brought me to LA was UCLA Film School. Tashome Gabriel, who's featured in the film, was the one who suggested that I come out to UCLA for film school. I had been fortunate enough to do study abroad in Kenya, East Africa, and study with Ngugi wa Thiong'o, a famous Kenyan writer, novelist, poet, playwright, and also filmmaker. So when I came back from Kenya, the fire was lit under me to go to film school. And I was basically kind of waffling between Howard and Howard University in DC and UCLA. And Hailey, who's in the film, advised me to go to UCLA because they had more equipment and more facilities than Howard did at that time. And he also said that I was hard headed enough so that I could deal with some of the knuckleheads that I would probably encounter at UCLA. So he was right. I was able to. And so that was the impetus for that. By the time I get to LA, there are not that many of the LA Rebellion filmmakers who are actually at the school. I come right at the very end of the period where there were more filmmakers, but the ethos and the spirit of the LA Rebellion filmmakers was well known to me, thankfully, because I had been exposed to Black film from my dad, who would take me to, um, the first Black film festivals that existed in Philadelphia. We went to those. So I knew something about the LA Rebellion makers before I actually went to film school. And I saw Ben Caldwell back in 1980 when he was touring with some of his films, some of his more experimental films. So I knew a little bit about them. And so when I got there, I was able to actually be more a part of the group and be influenced by folks who had gone through there. And it was a tough experience going through UCLA Film School. I will not try to sugarcoat it. Um, there were a lot of difficulties in terms of financial, trying to make the movies that you wanted to make and not having money to make those films, but doing the best you can using the resources that you had available to you. And also, sexism and racism um, that, you know, that just goes with being in, um, you know,
Yeah.
educational institutions.
Speaking to that, those challenges, our next question that we wanted to just dive into was, what were your learnings and takeaways? What mistakes did you made that you would hope a filmmaker in this day and time could learn from?
Okay, so well, the mistakes that I made,
Mhm.
thankfully, students don't have to make those same mistakes now because when we were there, we really still mostly had the option of working on film as opposed to video. It wasn't at the time where digital video was in place yet, or even just video. Um, it was still, the equipment was still very heavy and very cumbersome, not like it is now. So I would say my biggest mistake was that I spent a lot of money and went into debt making my films. And it took me a long time, probably almost 15, 20 years to pay off all the student loan debt that I took in my years when I was in film school. But ultimately, for me, it was worth it. And I probably would still do it again, but everybody don't need to do that. Uh, so that's just my thing that I would have said. The thing that I feel like I did that was successful that I wish more students would do now would be when we were in school, we were constantly exposed to world cinema. And I think it's really important for anyone who's interested in filmmaking to be as exposed to as much world cinema, not just Hollywood cinema or entertainment films. People should try to explore, national cinemas from the various countries in Africa, Asia, Latin America, the Caribbean, so on and so forth. When you see those filmmakers tell their stories, you realize that there's different ways to use this media of cinema that we have available to us. So it's really important for people to be able to experience the world through different lenses and different forms of storytelling.
Okay.
I went to film school in undergrad, and so I also was exposed to some of those you know international films, and they were wonderful, and they kind of seemed, I guess word I'm thinking is unchained. They seemed
Mm.
to have a lot more freedom in their creativity and their content than a lot of American films do. And so I'm wondering if, I think in the film someone mentioned something about like kind of imperfect cinema and like kind of just creating the art you want to make. And sometimes it seems like the art we make, even as Black artists, is formed under the white gaze. And so how did you kind of uh, try to circumvent that? How did you just, in this institution, make the films that you wanted to make and send the messages that you wanted to send?
I think it was real important for us to rely on each other as both mentors as well as colleagues and, dare I even say co-conspirators in a way, because, you know, we were doing something that was very different. Um, Tashome exposed us to, the filmmakers who formulated the idea of imperfect cinema. And that, for us, part of I think what imperfect cinema meant for us was also to involve our communities in our filmmaking practice. So, sometimes in the films, you see that there are professional actors, but there's also people who are playing themselves, which we would, I would call, or actually one of our professors, Bill Nichols, would call social actors. And so we would cast people who were the characters that they were in real life, but to be in the service of the film. And I think that freedom of being able to say, okay, this person might not be the best actor, but
Mhm.
their lived experience is important enough so that it should be shared with a larger audience. That was really kind of a strong um, impetus for us to make the kinds of films that we wanted to make. We knew that we wanted to represent our own communities, whoever those people, were or might be. So, it wasn't any big thing for Charlie Burnett to drive down, Slauson Avenue or Imperial Boulevard and just pick up a bunch of kids and ask them if they wanted to work on a film, or, and we would just train those people on the spot. This is how you hold the microphone. This is how you run the sound recorder. This is how you help put up the lights or what have you. And so that those practices at that particular time made film be more accessible to people. They didn't always want to go ahead and make film, but they saw the process of making film and they participated in the process of making film. And when we did have video, we put the monitors on on the concrete so people could see what we're doing, and see what it was that we were trying to do. A lot of people thought that we were TV news or something like that. But once they stopped and they looked at what it was that we were doing, it became more apparent to them that what we were trying to do was, tell stories of our community or document things that were happening in our community and allow the people who were a part of the community to be both in front of the camera and behind the camera at the same time.
Wow. Co-creating films with the community.
Mhm.
That's like a revolutionary concept too. And it seems like we've kind of lost sight of that in the industry. I guess I'm also wondering how that work can continue in modern film. I mean, the group that you were a part of was influential, but it seemed like you all kind of broke apart at some point, and then you all came together again for this film. Where would you say like the movement is now, this film movement that you were a part of?
I think it's still, continuing. It just takes different forms. There are more like film collectives that are happening again in and around LA and in and around like Atlanta and New York East Coast stuff. So I think that those are, they might be smaller pockets of people, but I do think that makers are influencing each other in doing work together in different types of ways. I'm one of the groups that I basically just got associated with because of the situation with COVID is the New Negress Society. And that's a group of women filmmakers. They're all over the place. They're primarily on the East Coast, but they're from all over and they work with each other to continue to make and produce films and distribute films. So I'm encouraged by seeing these younger sisters look up to us and what we did and then continuing on in their own way. Their works might be more experimental and playing with form, but I do think that their works are very valuable. And I also think that like people like Hailey and Shrikiana with Sankofa in Washington, D.C., and also Ben Caldwell with Chaos in Los Angeles, they provide spaces for filmmakers, artists, musicians, cultural workers, whoever, to come together and have conversations. So I think that we did not change Hollywood, but we did make an impact in terms of the American independent film movement, and out, we brought things more out in the open than they were before we got there. Let's put it that way.
Mhm.
So I still think that the LA rebellion is continuing. I don't think that it's actually over, even though the scholars and the historians might say, well, this period was this time. But I still think that, as you could see from the films, there's still filmmakers that are active. They might be doing different types of work. They might be involved in K through 12 education like Alile was, or they might be, doing different things like what Barbara McCullough is doing, or Fumalaya Makara with her Heritage Film Festival. So there's the movement is still active. It's just morphed
Mm-hmm.
into different types of facets. So I don't think it's gone. I think it's still continuing. And there's, there are a number of us who also are, professors in the academy like myself. And we try to encourage our students, say, hey, look, this was a collective. You all can do the same kind of thing. And that's the wonderful thing that I like about interacting with younger audiences, and when they see Spirits of Rebellion, is that they get that, yo, this is something that these folks did that we can also do. And it doesn't have to be bound by a system that is basically not going to embrace your ideals and vision. You can go ahead and do whatever it is that you need to do to get your work done, period. Yeah.
Period.
I think
Yes.
that was the biggest takeaway that I got, where you highlighted at the end of the film people like Carol Parrott Blue, who's doing work in Houston and collecting stories from all across Houston and honing in on the fact that those stories can change the world, like especially when we own our stories. And I I think even in my own personal work as a writer and a creative, I'm hungry because I know that when I'm writing, I'm healing. And when I'm creating art, I'm healing. And how can our community have that opportunity to create art? So I think my question is, what advice do you have for filmmakers who want to do work to uplift community stories?
I think you just said it, Frankie. Making films like writing is like healing in a
Mhm.
way. It might be a struggle to get it out there and put it out in the world, but once you put it out in the world, you know, people tend to appreciate and are also nourished by what it is that you share.
Mm.
So I think that's the biggest thing, is like, just do the work. It's easy to say, but it's hard to do. So I think that's kind of the message, is just, if you're on the path, stay on the path if you can. And if you can't stay on the path, then support others who are on the path. I think that's one way to kind of do it. It, independent film is very difficult to sustain a career in. Like, very few of us actually were able to just make films. Even the icons of the LA Rebellion are, doing other types of things. Both, Charlie Burnett and Julie have been teaching at various institutions on and off as they make films. So the kind of filmmaking that we do does not sustain us financially, but it does inspire us to keep going and to influence other young people to, pick up the mantle and go on this journey. And I mean, I think it's a very interesting landscape now that didn't exist when we were, um, developing in the 80s. I mean, now, thankfully, in the 2020s, we do have, streaming services, and we do have, YouTube or the internet, so that if you do want to put stuff up, you can. The question is, how do you sustain it? That's more of the issue. But I do think that, as we continue to grow and develop, as we have, it used to be a real hard line between people being involved in the independent world and the Hollywood world. That doesn't exist the way that it used to. It's definitely very fluid, especially now, when people will go back and forth between doing, you know, webisodes, or streaming television or series, and then a film, or some kind of other types of social media work, etc. So I think it's a changed landscape, which, and it's opened up for the better, I feel.
Mhm.
Um, I think going back to what we were saying about, creating can be healing. I wonder what advice you would have for people who aren't able to just get into the mode of creating imperfect work, and maybe are perfectionists and don't even start a project or put their work out there. And if there are any ways that maybe they can overcome those barriers.
Well, I guess that's kind of like a mind thing. You have to like get through that. I'm currently teaching right now in COVID. I have 72 students in a production class that I'm teaching online. They have no access to equipment, no access to editing facilities, and they're still creating work, which I'm like blown away that they could even, think about learning and trying to create. All they have is their phones. All they have is like simple editing software, iMovie or what the Avid Media Composer software, which is Avid Media Composer First, which is free. So they are finding ways to continue to do work even without the resources. So I think we all should be encouraged and inspired to try to, do whatever it is that you can. It's not that, you might not be able to do a whole lot, but you can do a little bit. That's what Shrikiana says in the film. It's like, I didn't make a whole lot of films, but I made a little bit of films and I could be proud of that, and it's like, that's right, because when you go back and look at it, it's like, yeah, we're not, we're not making like a film every year, but I would much rather watch a Shrikiana Haile Garima film than Quentin Tarantino. I don't care. That's like, yes, he made a film every year or every other year, whatever the heck it was. But I find his work hard to watch or find it. I don't think it's gonna have the test of time. When you can look at Killer of Sheep or Daughters of the Dust or Passing Through 40, 50 years later and still see something that you haven't seen before, that's pretty magical. So I think it's worth it, all the sacrifice, all the, whatever it was that, that we did and that we still do to make work that is so important for people to be inspired and just keep on hustling or do whatever it is that you have. I think the main thing is that people need to like not work alone, that you really do need to try to build some type of community. Everybody in your community does not necessarily have to be filmmakers, but if they can be people who are, you know, creative in some kind of way or who want to do something, I mean, I was very lucky. I ended up, having a husband who was very supportive and wrote screenplays, but like his mom would make food whenever I did shoot a movie. So I didn't have to do catering. I just would say, hey, Noy, can you make, some chicken and some rice for me for the crew? And, she would do it. So the resources that you have or the people that you have that are available to you or around you, they'll do whatever. You just have to be brave enough to ask them and to, reach out for help and assistance whenever you need it. And it's not like you have to like, oh, I'm the great director. You need to do that for me. It's more, again, it's in the spirit of having people buy into whatever vision or thing that you have and respecting and allowing them to bring whatever they have to the work as well. That's the key thing. And that's where I think people need to kind of, you know, open up. And that's what we tried to do. We weren't trying to do hierarchical, structure where we were greater than whoever. It was more, again, as a collaborative where we would, try to work on each other's films when we could. And that's why it was successful and transformative.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. I think that's bringing us back again to community and co-creating these things. We're not silos. We should be reaching out to each other. And so,
Yeah.
Okay.
Frankie, did you have one more that you wanted to?
Yeah, I definitely do. Let me just dive into here. Um, so the film closes sharing that the arts are spiritual sustenance for our community, and we've been talking a little bit about that here. And in this world right now, STEM programming is that hot topic and it's gaining steam. And you go into schools and everything's a STEM program. And so, um, in the light of this COVID-19 pandemic, how do you hope that arts can continue to bring healing to our world? And are there any projects that you can highlight that are continuing in this legacy?
Well, I think one thing COVID has taught us that we do need the arts.
Mm.
Whatever way we can bring arts into our lives, that it does enrich us. I agree, and it's kind of troubling with schools kind of always focusing on STEM instead of STEAM. Is really you need STEAM, not just STEM, because STEAM makes people learn how to communicate with each other. We have, I teach at an institution, UCSD, which is probably more well known for its engineering and medical school, and there's the oceanography program, but they need people in the arts and the humanities to learn how to tell whatever scientific discoveries or findings that they have. They need us to be able to tell their stories. You still got to tell the story. That's the bottom line. So you can make all these great innovations and findings, but you have to figure out a way to communicate that to a broader public. And that's what STEAM does. It, like, all those things together try to like speak to each other and pull other parts of our lives together. Without the arts, we don't exist. We need dance, we need music, we need filmmaking, we need creative writing, we need visual art, sculpture, painting, what have you. We need all those things in our lives for us to be whole as a people, and we need to respect that contribution that those activities offer us. I cannot wait to go back into an art museum or into a movie theater space. I really miss doing that, and I'm hoping that people will value that even more when we are all able to go back and be in communion
Yeah.
with each other and talk about ideas, you know, more uh, spontaneously than we can in this particular environment. So I'm hopeful, and I think that things will change. I see the power of art in my own daughter's lives and how that has made them understand, you know, um, math and science better because they had exposure to music and art specifically. So I think that's something that we should celebrate, and try to promote more to all of our children so that they can be productive citizens in society. That there's a yin and a yang for a reason, and so we need to make sure that we um, expose our kids to different things, not just one thing
Yeah.
in of itself. Yeah.
I loved how you like highlighted the communication piece. We got to communicate these ideas, and humans are built to express, share stories. It's just how we connect to each other. I cannot wait to be back in COVID to experience art in person, to experience just simple communication in person. But I think it was so key to hear how all of that STEM, it comes alive when you have the arts, and it all needs to be there.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Very much so. Very much so.
We do have a question from a viewer. They said, how do you think we get to the point where these underrepresented stories are as well known and well distributed as Tarantino films?
um, I think it's up to us as being audience members, make sure that we spread the word when we see, these kinds of films being shown and played, that, you let your friends know, and try to keep building stuff. As filmmakers, we can do but so much. We need people to help get the word out. And so I think that's one thing that, if you know somebody's work and you like it, please pass it on. Please spread it on social media. Please, right now, a lot of the works of many of the filmmakers are on the Criterion channel. So, spend some time, if you ain't got the cash, Criterion got a 2-week window that you can watch for free, so do that just so you can be exposed to as many films as possible. But I think the main thing is that, we know that the the studio system is going to support a very finite group of people, and it is not going to support a larger whole. We've seen that time and time again. We don't have to reinvent the wheel to know that that's not the way it's going to go. So we need to support whatever um, systems, artists, groups, collectives, festivals, whatever venues there can be, so that this work does have a place and a home, and that it can continue to exist and expand and hopefully influence others. So, yeah,
Oh,
hope that answered the question.
We need to buy Black, we need to view Black, we need to do everything, as much as we can. So we're coming towards the end of the Q&A. But I guess I wonder, like, what do you think is your legacy, and what do you think this, what do you hope this documentary will accomplish for years to come?
Well, I think it's already been happening. You guys are watching the film in Salt Lake City, Utah. Did I think that was going to happen when I was making the film? No. So
thank
it's
you.
like, hey, thank you. I'm grateful that people are being exposed to the work. I think the biggest thing for most people was that people knew about, like, some of the filmmakers, but they might know about Julie, or they might know about Hailey, but they never put us together in the same institution at the same time. And so what this film does um, is kind of show you that there are these connections between these different group of filmmakers. We were not all at UCLA at the same time, but each wave of filmmakers influenced the next filmmakers, influenced the next filmmakers, influenced the next filmmakers. And so um, our our impact might not be the greatest impact, but it did make some shifts that I believe have continued today. If you ask me, I believe that people like Ryan Coogler, with the way that he approached Black Panther, the fact that Ryan Coogler brought in his posse from USC, and then had women as heads of department, like, Hannah Beekler as the production designer, Ruth Carter as the costume designer, Rachel Morrison as the cinematographer, he helped change the game. And I think, they might not say it, but I'm sure that this ethos of making films in a more egalitarian way was something that the LA Rebellion filmmakers passed on. Now, Coogler went to USC, he didn't go to UCLA, but I bet I will put my money on it. At one time, he must have seen some films at UCLA and drank from that water fountain. So he had the same Kool-Aid that we all did. And that's how he's, seeing that it's a collective, it's a community that is making these types of films. So I think that is like so important, that we keep that idea and that legacy, that we can be included in this vision, and that we should be included in this vision, and that we can move this vision to include larger groups of people and experiences. So that's what I think the legacy is, that you know
Yeah.
we took people with us. And the filmmakers, a lot of times it was interesting to see, um, when their kids came to the screening. I was so nervous when it was the debut screening, the premiere screening, and Charlie was there with his sons, and Alile was there with her son, and you know um, Hailey's son was in the audience and stuff. But it was just like, I was like going crazy because I was nervous that um, they wouldn't like it, or what have you. And it was the greatest compliment to me that the kids of the filmmakers came up to me afterwards crying with gratitude, because they were so grateful that they finally understood what it was that their parents were doing all these years, and that it made sense, that there was this vision of something greater than what they themselves were doing, that would lead to this, larger movement of Black filmmakers making and creating works that people could access in the future. So yeah.
Well, we just want to thank you so much for spending time with us and allowing us to get more of this background and hear
Yeah.
more of the story. Like you shared, we're in Utah and we're hungry to hear this work and to create this art ourselves in our community and bring this type of healing to our communities here. So thank you so much. Um, we want to thank the Film Center for making this happen and all of the work that's been done behind this. And so we just thank you. We're so excited to just take what we were fed and continue our own work and to see this grow the work here in Utah.
Thank you all very much for having me. Thank you to Patrick and everybody at the Utah Film Center, especially Russell for doing that shout out on the TV show several times. I appreciate you, brother. And everybody, thank you all for being who you are. And please continue to do what you all do. You are appreciated and you are respected and cherished. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Bye.
Mhm.